He owned the city, the politicians, and, technically, he owned her. But on a rainy Tuesday in November, the quiet maid who scrubbed his marble floors decided to burn the contract. She didn't pack a bag. She didn't run. She put on a dress the color of fresh blood and walked straight for the front door. What happens when the invisible help becomes the most visible threat in the room? This isn't just a love story. It's a war declaration. Listen closely, because the silence in the Moretti mansion is about to be shattered by a scream. The rain in Chicago didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Inside the sprawling estate of Gannon Nico Moretti, the weather was irrelevant. The temperature was always a perfect 68 degrees. The air smelled of beeswax and expensive leather, and the silence was heavy enough to crush a lung. Rowan adjusted the collar of her uniform. It was stiff, black, and designed to make her invisible. That was the point of being a maid in the Moretti household. You were furniture that breathed. You saw everything. The politicians taking envelopes in the study, the bruised knuckles Gannon nursed with scotch on Tuesday nights, the way his eyes went dead when he was on the phone with his lawyers. But you said nothing. Rowan had been invisible for 11 months. She was 24, with calloused hands and a debt that hung over her father's head like a guillotine. That debt was the only reason she was here, scrubbing grout with a toothbrush, while Gannon Moretti decided who lived and who died in the intricate chess game of the Chicago underworld. But tonight, the debt was paid. She had received the text message at 4 p.m. from an unregistered number. It's done. He's safe. Get out. Rowan looked at the phone hidden beneath her mattress. Her father was in a safe house in Wisconsin. The leverage Gannon held over her was gone. She could have just slipped out the back door, wearing her jeans and a hoodie, disappearing into the grey mist of the city. But rage is a funny thing. It doesn't want to disappear. It wants to be seen. Rowan walked to the back of her small closet. Pushed behind the grey wool coats and the stiff uniforms was a garment bag she had bought 3 years ago, before her life collapsed. She unzipped it. The silk spilled out like liquid ruby. It was a backless slip dress, crimson red, cut dangerously high on the thigh. It was a dress meant for galas, for red carpets, for women who had names and futures. She stripped off the maid's uniform. She left it in a heap on the floor, a pile of black fabric that looked like a dead shadow. She showered, scrubbing the scent of lemon polish from her skin. She applied the lipstick she had been saving, a dark matte red. She stepped into the heels she hadn't worn in a year. When she looked in the mirror, the invisible maid was gone. A stranger stared back, someone dangerous. The plan was simple. Walk out the front door, let the cameras see her. Let him see her. Not as the help, but as the woman who survived him. Downstairs the house was quiet. It was 7:30 p.m. Gannon usually took his dinner in the study at this hour, reviewing the ledger. The guards would be at the perimeter gate, not the foyer. Rowan descended the grand staircase. Her heels clicked against the marble. Clack, clack, clack. The sound echoed, sharp and deliberate. It was the sound of a gun hammer being pulled back. She reached the bottom of the stairs and turned toward the massive oak double doors. Her hand was inches from the brass handle when the deep, gravelly voice stopped her heart in her chest. "Where are you going dressed like that?" Rowan froze. She didn't turn around immediately. She took a breath, steeling herself. She knew that voice. It was the voice that commanded legions of men, the voice that could freeze a boardroom. She turned slowly. Gannon Moretti was leaning against the doorframe of his study, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket, just a white dress shirt with the top 2 buttons undone, and sleeves rolled up to reveal the dark ink of tattoos winding up his forearms. He looked tired, dangerous, and utterly confused. His eyes, usually the color of cold steel, swept over her. They started at her heels, traveled up the slit in her dress, lingered on the curve of her waist, and finally locked onto her eyes. He didn't recognize her at first. To him, she was just the maid. Then recognition dawned. His jaw tightened. The glass in his hand tipped slightly. "Rowan?" he asked, the name sounding foreign on his tongue. He rarely used it. "Mr. Moretti?" she said. Her voice was steady, surprising even her. "I'm resigning." Gannon pushed off the doorframe. He walked into the foyer, closing the distance between them. He was a large man, over 6'3", built like a linebacker who had learned to wear Armani. The air around him always felt charged with static. "Resigning?" He let out a dark, humorless chuckle. "You don't resign, Rowan. We have an agreement. Your father's debt is paid," she interrupted. Gannon stopped 3 feet from her. The smell of his cologne, sandalwood, and tobacco invaded her space. His eyes narrowed. He wasn't looking at the maid anymore. He was looking at the woman in the red dress, and the shift in his gaze was terrifyingly intense. "Paid?" Gannon repeated softly. "By who?" "That doesn't matter," Rowan said, clutching her small clutch purse tighter. "The money was wired to your offshore account in the Caymans 10 minutes ago. Check your phone." Gannon didn't check his phone. He didn't look away from her. The red dress seemed to offend him and captivate him all at once. In a house of muted greys and blacks, she was a bleeding wound. "You think you can just wire money and walk out my front door looking like—" He gestured vaguely at her, his hand agitated. "Looking like a siren sent to lure sailors to their death?" "I'm wearing a dress, Gannon. It's what women do when they aren't scrubbing your floors." He flinched at the use of his first name. No one called him Gannon, except his mother and his enemies. "You're not going out there," he snapped, his voice dropping an octave. "Not in that." "Excuse me?" "It's raining," he said, the excuse flimsy. "And it's dangerous. You have no idea what's happening on the streets tonight. The Russos are making moves in the South Side. A woman like you, walking alone, dressed in red. You're a target." "I've been a target since I stepped foot in this house," Rowan countered, her chin lifting. "I'd rather take my chances with the Russos than spend another minute as a ghost in this hallway." She turned back to the door. "Stop," he commanded. It wasn't a request. Rowan grabbed the handle. Click. The sound of the lock engaging didn't come from the door. It came from the keypad on the wall. Gannon had hit the master security lock. The deadbolts on the front door slammed home with a mechanical thud. Rowan spun around, fury igniting in her chest. "Unlock it." "No." Gannon drained his drink and set the glass on a side table with a loud clatter. "You want to leave?" "Fine. We verify the payment. We verify your father is safe. We do this properly. But you are not walking out onto the street looking like a walking invitation for trouble." "You don't own me anymore," Rowan shouted. The echo rang through the high ceilings. Gannon stepped closer, crowding her against the heavy wood of the door. He was close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his grey eyes. He looked angry, yes, but there was something else there. Panic. "You don't get it, do you?" he hissed, leaning down so his face was level with hers. "It's not just about the debt. You've been here for a year. You've seen things, heard things. You think I can just let you waltz out because a wire transfer cleared?" "So what? You're going to kill me?" Rowan challenged him, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Gannon looked at her lips, then back to her eyes. His hand twitched, as if he wanted to reach out and touch the bare skin of her shoulder, but he restrained himself. If I wanted you dead, you'd never have made it to the stairs, he muttered. But I can't let you leave. Not tonight. Why not tonight? Gannon looked at the red dress again. His expression darkened. Because tonight is the night I might actually lose everything. And I can't be worrying about my ex-maid getting snatched by my rivals because she wanted to make a fashion statement. Rowan blinked. Lose everything? Before Gannon could answer, the lights in the foyer flickered. Once. Twice. Then the house plunged into total darkness. The electronic hum of the security system died. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the silence of luxury anymore. It was the silence of a predator holding its breath. In the dark, Rowan felt Gannon's hand clamp onto her wrist. His grip was iron. "Get down," he whispered, his voice stripped of all arrogance, replaced by cold, tactical precision. "Gannon, what? I said get down!" He yanked her to the floor, just as the stained glass window above the door shattered inward. A hail of bullets tore through the mahogany wood where Rowan's head had been seconds ago. The red dress was now dragging across the floor as Gannon Moretti, the King of Chicago, covered her body with his own. The real-life story was just beginning, and the dress wasn't a statement anymore. It was a target. The foyer of the Moretti estate, usually a cathedral of silence, had become a war zone. Shards of the antique stained glass window lay scattered across the marble like jagged diamonds. The rain blew in through the gaping hole, soaking the expensive rugs, mixing with the dust of pulverized drywall. Gannon's weight was heavy on top of Rowan. He wasn't crushing her, but shielding her. She could feel the rapid, sledgehammer beat of his heart against her back. It was the only thing telling her they were both still alive. "Stay down," he growled into her ear, his breath hot. "Do not move until I tell you." Another burst of automatic gunfire chewed up the plaster wall 3 feet above them. The shooters were professional. They were suppressing the target, keeping heads down while a breach team likely moved in. Gannon rolled off her, moving with a feline agility that defied his size. He reached under his waistband at the small of his back. Rowan expected him to pull out a phone. Instead, he produced a matte black Beretta. "Gannon!" Rowan gasped, pushing herself up on her elbows. The red dress was already ruined, stained with the dust of the floor and a smear of blood from where a shard of glass had grazed Gannon's arm. "I told you!" he snapped, racking the slide of the gun. "I told you it was a bad night to leave." "Who are they?" "Russo's. Or maybe the cartel. At this point, does it matter?" He peeked over the edge of a tipped-over console table. He fired 2 shots toward the broken window. A grunt of pain echoed from outside, followed by shouting in Italian. "We can't stay here," Rowan said, her voice trembling, but her mind sharpening. The initial shock was fading, replaced by the survival instinct that had kept her going through 3 years of poverty. "They'll come through the back, the kitchen entrance." Gannon looked at her, surprised. "The security grid is down. The kitchen doors are mag-locked." "Not the delivery entrance," Rowan said quickly. "The latch has been sticky for 3 weeks. I told the house manager, but he never fixed it. If they know the house, they know that door is weak." Gannon stared at her for a split second. The maid who scrubbed his floors knew the vulnerabilities of his fortress better than his head of security. "Lead the way," he commanded, "but stay behind me." They scrambled to their feet. Gannon kept a hand on the small of her back, guiding her low. They abandoned the grand foyer, sprinting into the shadows of the main hallway. The red silk of her dress swished violently around her legs, the high slit allowing her to run without tripping. They reached the heavy swinging doors of the kitchen just as the sound of shattering glass erupted from the back of the house. "Damn it!" Gannon cursed. "You were right." "Servants' passage," Rowan hissed, grabbing his wrist. Gannon hesitated. The servants' passage was a narrow, unlit corridor, behind the pantry that led to the laundry chutes and the basement. He hadn't stepped foot in it since he was a child. "It's too tight," he muttered. "It's that or a bullet in the chest," she countered, pulling him. He relented. They slipped behind the massive industrial refrigerator and pried open a panel in the wall. The air inside smelled of dust and old cedar. It was pitch black. Rowan went first. She knew this hallway by heart. She used it to move laundry carts so the guests wouldn't see the help. She moved blindly, counting her steps. 1, 2, 3, turn left. Gannon was close behind her. His large frame filled the narrow space. His hand found her shoulder, using her as a guide. It was an intimate, desperate connection. "Slow down," he whispered. "We have to get to the garage," Rowan whispered back. "Do you have a car down there that isn't rigged? The armored SUV is—" "No," she interrupted. "If they cut the power, they probably jammed the electronic starters on the high-end cars. Please tell me you have something old. Something analog." Gannon was silent for a moment as they navigated a sharp turn. "My father's '69 Chevelle. It's under a tarp in the back bay." "That works." They reached the end of the passage. A metal grate looked out into the expansive garage. The space was illuminated only by the emergency red lights pulsing on the walls. Rowan peered through the grate. "It's clear." "Wait," Gannon pulled her back. The door from the main house to the garage burst open. 2 men in tactical gear, faces covered by balaclavas, swept into the room. They had silencers on their rifles. They moved methodically, checking under the cars. Rowan stopped breathing. She was pressed flat against Gannon's chest in the cramped tunnel. She could feel the hard lines of his muscles tensed for violence. "2 of them," Gannon breathed against her hair. "I have 5 rounds left." "Can you hit them from here?" "Not both before one of them sprays this wall and turns us into Swiss cheese." Gannon looked around the cramped space. His eyes landed on a breaker box on the wall inside the tunnel. He looked at Rowan, a silent question in his eyes. "Do you trust me?" He didn't wait for an answer. He holstered his gun and reached for the breaker box, ripping the cover off. He found the main heavy-duty fuse for the garage emergency lights. "When the lights go out," Gannon whispered, "count to 3. Then kick the grate open and run for the Chevelle. Don't look back. Don't stop." "What about you?" "I'm going to take out the trash." He yanked the fuse. The garage plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. 1. Rowan's heart screamed. 2. She gripped the handle of the grate. 3. She kicked the metal grate. It clanged open. She scrambled out into the void, the heels of her shoes discarded in the tunnel, running barefoot on the cold concrete. Behind her, the sound of chaos erupted. There was a scuffle, the wet sound of a fist hitting flesh, a grunt, and then 2 deafening gunshots that lit up the dark like strobe lights. Rowan reached the back bay. She felt the canvas tarp. She ripped it off, the dust choking her. She fumbled for the driver's side door. It was unlocked. She threw herself into the leather seat. "Keys!" She frantically patted the visor. "Where are the keys?" The passenger door ripped open. Rowan screamed, raising her hands. "Drive!" Gannon roared, throwing himself into the passenger seat. He jammed the key into the ignition. He was bleeding from a cut above his brow, blood masking one side of his face. Rowan didn't argue. She turned the key. The engine of the Chevelle roared to life, a raw, mechanical beast waking up. "Reverse! Go!" She slammed the gear shift. The tires screeched, burning rubber on the polished floor. She reversed violently, spinning the wheel. The car whipped around, facing the garage door. "The door won't open!" Rowan yelled. "The power!" Gannon looked at the reinforced wooden garage door, then at Rowan. He didn't look scared. He looked exhilaratingly alive. "Ram it!" Rowan looked at him like he was insane. "I said ram it, Rowan! Hit the gas!" She floored it. The muscle car surged forward, 400 horsepower, kicking them back into the seats. The wooden door loomed closer. Rowan squeezed her eyes shut. Crash. Wood splintered. Metal groaned. The heavy car smashed through the barrier, debris raining down on the hood and windshield. They burst out into the rainy Chicago night, fishtailing onto the wet pavement of the driveway. "Left!" Gannon shouted. "Take the service road!" Rowan fought the wheel, the car skidding sideways before gripping the asphalt. She sped down the winding driveway, leaving the burning, broken mansion behind in the rearview mirror. They were out. But as Rowan looked over at Gannon, who was reloading his magazine with shaky hands, she knew the cage hadn't been left behind. They had just moved into a bigger, more dangerous one. The adrenaline crash was worse than the fear. 30 minutes later, the '69 Chevelle was idling under a flickering street lamp in an alleyway in the meatpacking district. The rain drummed relentlessly on the metal roof, creating a rhythmic, claustrophobic sound. Inside, the heater was blasting, but Rowan couldn't stop shivering. She sat with her hands gripping the steering wheel, her knuckles white. She was barefoot, her expensive red dress torn at the hem, splattered with grease from the garage floor. The glamour of her exit had been stripped away, leaving something raw and terrified in its place. Gannon sat in the passenger seat, pressing a handkerchief to his forehead. The bleeding had slowed. He was staring at her, his expression unreadable in the shadows. "You drive well," he said quietly. It was an absurd thing to say, given the circumstances. Rowan let out a jagged, hysterical laugh. "My father was a mechanic before he was a gambler. I grew up under cars." "I know," Gannon said. "I read your file." The reminder snapped Rowan back to reality. The anger returned, burning through the cold. She turned to face him. "My file!" she spat. "Right, because I'm just an asset to you, a liability now." "You saved my life back there," Gannon said, his voice void of the usual condescension. "If we had taken the main hallway, we'd be dead. You knew about the kitchen door." "I was the maid, Gannon. I knew which floorboards squeaked and which windows rattled. I knew everything about that house. You just never looked at me long enough to realize it." Gannon looked down at his hands. I looked. The air in the car shifted. It became thick, charged with the same electricity that had been in the foyer before the lights went out. "Why were you really leaving tonight, Rowan?" he asked, turning his head to look at her. His grey eyes were intense, stripping her bare. "And don't tell me it was just about the debt. You waited until I was home. You put on that dress. You wanted a reaction." Rowan felt a flush rise on her neck. "I wanted you to know I existed. I wanted to walk out the front door, like a human being, not a ghost." "You got your reaction," he murmured, his eyes dropping to the torn silk on her thigh. "And now look at you. Ruined shoes, ruined dress, running from a hit squad with a man you hate." "I don't hate you," Rowan said, the words slipping out before she could check them. Gannon raised an eyebrow. "I hate what you do," she corrected. "I hate how you own people. Like my father." "Speaking of your father," Gannon sat up straighter, wincing slightly as his bruised ribs protested. He pulled his smartphone from his pocket. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. "We need to verify that transfer. If the Russos hit my house tonight, the timing of your payment is suspicious." "It's not suspicious," Rowan defended, though a seed of doubt planted itself in her stomach. "I got the text. My father is safe." "Who sent the text?" "I don't know. A contact. Someone who said they could help." Gannon's face hardened. He tapped the screen rapidly, accessing his secure banking app. He navigated through layers of encryption until he found the ledger for the Cayman account. He stared at the screen for a long time. The rain pounded on the roof. "Rowan," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Look at this." He held the phone up. Rowan squinted at the bright screen. She saw the deposit. 500,000. The exact amount of her father's gambling debt. But it wasn't the amount that made her blood run cold. It was the sender ID attached to the wire. V. Russo Holdings. Rowan stopped breathing. Russo? Vittorio Russo? The man who just shot up my house, Gannon confirmed. He pulled the phone back, his jaw clenching tight enough to snap bone. Your father wasn't saved, Rowan. His debt was bought. I don't understand. Tears pricked her eyes. Why would Russo pay my debt? To get you out of the house, Gannon said, the realization dawning on him with horrific clarity, or more specifically, to get me distracted. He looked at her, and for the first time, Rowan saw true fear in the Mafia boss's eyes, not for himself, but for the situation. Think, Rowan. You get a text at 4:15 p.m. You prepare to leave. You come downstairs at 7:30 p.m., right when the shift change happens for the perimeter guards. You cause a scene. You distract me. You distract the house staff. I was the distraction, Rowan whispered, horror washing over her. I was the Trojan horse. You didn't know, Gannon said quickly, seeing her crumble. He reached out, his large hand covering hers on the steering wheel. His skin was rough, warm and grounding. They played you. They used your father to get to me. My father, Rowan choked out. If Russo bought the debt, then Russo has your father, Gannon finished. He's not in a safe house in Wisconsin. He's likely in a basement in the South Side. Rowan pulled her hand away, covering her mouth to stifle a sob. The red dress felt like a costume now, a foolish, childish thing she had worn to play a game she didn't understand. She had walked right into a trap, and she had dragged Gannon into it with her. I killed us, she whispered. I let them in. No, Gannon said firmly. He grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. We are not dead yet, and I don't let people take what is mine. Rowan froze. What is yours? I just told you. I resigned. The contract changed the moment Russo bought it, Gannon said, his eyes hard as flint. Technically you belong to him now. He bought the debt. He owns the claim. He leaned in closer, the scent of rain, blood, and expensive cologne filling her senses. But I'm not going to let him keep you. We're going to get your father back. And then I'm going to burn Vittorio Russo's empire to the ground for touching my house and for touching you. Me? Rowan asked, her voice barely audible. Why do you care? I'm just the maid. Gannon's thumb brushed her lower lip, smearing the remnants of her red lipstick. The gesture was possessive, tender, and terrifying. You haven't been just the maid to me for a long time, Rowan. Why do you think I never let you go? Why do you think I kept finding reasons to keep you in the study late at night? Rowan's breath hitched. We need a safe place, Gannon said, abruptly pulling back and breaking the spell. He was back to being the general. My penthouses are watched. The safe houses will be compromised if they hacked my accounts. Where do we go? Gannon looked out the window at the desolate, rain-swept street. There is one place, a place nobody knows about, not even my lieutenants. Where? My childhood home, Gannon said grimly. In the slums. It's been abandoned for 20 years. No heat, no power, no security. It's the last place they'll look for the king of Chicago. He looked at her red dress. And we need to get you out of that dress, he added. You look like a beacon. If we're going to the slums, you need to look like you belonged there. Rowan looked down at the silk. It was the dress she wore to be free. Now, She had to destroy it to survive. "Let's go," she said, putting the car in gear. The Chevelle rumbled forward, sliding into the darkness of the city. The rain didn't stop. It only fell harder, washing away the traces of who they were, leaving only who they needed to become. The '69 Chevelle rolled to a silent stop in an alleyway that smelled of wet cardboard and ozone. This wasn't the polished downtown district where Gannon Moretti held court. This was the Hollows, a neighborhood the city planners had forgotten, a grid of crumbling row houses and flickering streetlights. "Here," Gannon grunted, killing the engine. Rowan looked out the window. The house he pointed to was a narrow, 2-story brick structure with boarded-up windows. It looked like a tomb. "This is yours?" Rowan asked, disbelief coloring her tone. "It was my mother's," Gannon said, his voice devoid of sentiment. "I haven't been inside since I was 18, since the day I buried her." He opened the car door, the cold night air rushing in. Rowan shivered. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her exhausted and freezing in the tattered remains of the red dress. Gannon led her to the back door. The wood was rotten, but the padlock was new. A singular, gleaming piece of steel in a world of rust. He spun the dial. Right. Left. Right. The lock clicked. They stepped inside. The air was stale, cold, and heavy with dust, but it was dry. Gannon locked the door behind them and used the flashlight on his phone to scan the room. It was a small kitchen. A yellow formica table sat in the center, covered in a 20-year-old layer of grime. Wallpaper peeled in long strips like dead skin. It was a poverty Rowan recognized. It was the same poverty she had grown up in. "Upstairs," Gannon ordered. "The bathroom has a first aid kit hidden under the sink. I stocked it 5 years ago. Hopefully the rats haven't eaten the bandages." Rowan followed him up the creaking stairs. Her bare feet collected dust. In the bathroom, Gannon sat heavily on the edge of the clawfoot tub. He hissed in pain, clutching his side. His white shirt was soaked through with red on the left side. "Let me see," Rowan said, stepping forward. The maid was gone. The survivor was here. "I'm fine," Gannon gritted out. "You're bleeding on the floor," she countered, her voice firm. "And if you pass out from blood loss, I can't carry you. So let me see." Gannon looked up at her. In the harsh light of the phone flashlight, she looked ethereal and wrecked. Her makeup was smudged, her hair wild, the red dress hanging off one shoulder. He slowly unbuttoned his shirt. Rowan's breath hitched. His torso was a map of violence, old scars, knife wounds, bullet grazes, tattoos weaving around them like armor. But the fresh wound was a gash just above his hip bone, where a bullet had grazed him deep enough to tear muscle. "It needs stitches," Rowan said, assessing the damage with a clinical eye she'd learned from patching up her father after bad nights at the track. "Do you have whiskey?" "Bedroom. Bottom drawer of the dresser." Rowan went into the small bedroom. It was sparse. A twin bed, a dresser. She found a bottle of Jack Daniels and, surprisingly, a stack of old flannel shirts. She grabbed the bottle and a blue plaid shirt that looked soft and worn. She returned to the bathroom. "Drink this. Then pour it on the wound." Gannon took the bottle, uncapped it with his teeth, and took a long pull. He didn't flinch as he poured the alcohol over the raw flesh. He just gripped the edge of the tub until his knuckles turned white. "Thread the needle," he commanded. "I'm doing it," Rowan said. She found the suture kit in the dusty box. Her hands were shaking, but as soon as she touched the needle to his skin, they steadied. For the next 10 minutes, the only sound in the house was the rain on the roof and Gannon's controlled breathing. Rowan worked efficiently, sewing the skin of the most dangerous man in Chicago. She was so close to him. She could smell the iron of his blood and the musk of his skin. She could feel the heat radiating off him. "You have good hands," Gannon murmured, his eyes closed, his head leaning back against the tile wall. "I've had practice," Rowan said, tying off the last stitch. "My dad wasn't always careful." She snipped the thread. "Done." Gannon opened his eyes. They were dark, dilated from pain and the whiskey. He looked at her, really looked at her, in a way he never had when she was pouring his coffee. "You're freezing," he noted. Rowan looked down. She was shivering violently, her lips blue. The adrenaline had masked the cold, but now it was biting. "Here," Gannon said. He reached for the blue flannel shirt she had brought in. "Put this on." "It's yours?" "From a lifetime ago, before the suits, before the money." Rowan hesitated, then turned her back to him. She let the straps of the red dress fall. The silk pooled at her feet, a puddle of blood on the dusty tile. She stood there for a second in her undergarments, feeling vulnerable, before pulling the oversized flannel shirt on. It swallowed her. The sleeves hung past her hands. The hem hit her mid-thigh. It smelled like cedar and old paper. It was warm. She turned back around. Gannon was staring at the pile of red silk on the floor. "Burn it," he said quietly. "What?" "The dress. Burn it. Put it in the tub and burn it." "Why?" "Because." Gannon stood up, wincing but steady. He walked over to her, towering over her small frame. He reached out and buttoned the top button of the flannel shirt, his fingers grazing her throat. "Because Rowan the maid died in that foyer. And the woman in the red dress is the most wanted person in Chicago right now. If we're going to survive, you need to be someone else." He pulled a lighter from his pocket and flicked it. The flame danced in the dark room. He dropped it onto the silk. They watched in silence as the red dress caught fire, curling and blackening, the symbol of her rebellion turning into ash in a rusted bathtub. "Who do I need to be?" Rowan whispered, looking up at him. Gannon's gaze dropped to her mouth. The air between them crackled. "My partner," he said. Morning in the slums was grey and hostile. Rowan woke up curled on the bare mattress of the twin bed. Gannon was gone. Panic flared in her chest, a sharp, cold spike, until she heard the floorboards creak downstairs. She sat up. She was still wearing his flannel shirt. She felt different. The fear was still there, but it had hardened into a resolve. She wasn't just a victim of circumstance anymore. She was an accomplice. She went downstairs. Gannon was sitting at the kitchen table, dismantling his Beretta. He had cleaned the rust off a few parts and was oiling the slide. He wore a tight black t-shirt he must have found in the house, the bandage on his side creating a bulk beneath the fabric. "Coffee?" he offered, nodding to a rusted kettle on the stove. "It's instant. Tastes like dirt." "I'll take it," Rowan said. She poured a mug. "What's the plan?" Gannon slid the barrel back into the gun. Click. "We're blind," he said. "My phone is off. Tracking. We need a clean line to call Leo. He's the only captain I trust not to have sold me out to Russo." "So we buy a burner." "Not that simple." Gannon stood up, tucking the gun into his waistband. "Russo will have put a bounty out, street level. Every junkie and corner boy will be looking for a guy who looks like me and a girl who looks like you." He looked her over. "We need to change our look, and we need to see a man named Saul." "Who is Saul?" "A pawnbroker. He operates out of a basement 3 blocks over. He owes me a favor from 10 years ago, a big one." They left the house 10 minutes later. Gannon had found an old baseball cap, pulling it low over his eyes. Rowan tied her hair back and rubbed some soot from the fireplace onto her cheeks, masking her complexion. She looked like just another desperate soul in the hollows. The walk was tense, Every siren in the distance made Rowan flinch. They passed gang members on corners, huddled against the cold wind. Gannon walked with a different gait. Not the confident stride of a CEO, but the rolling, aggressive walk of a street fighter. He blended in perfectly. They reached a nondescript door behind a laundromat. Gannon knocked. A specific rhythm. A slide opened. Eyes peered out. "Closed," a voice rasped. "Open the door, Saul, or I'll remind you about that business in '98. The eyes widened. The locks tumbled. The door opened to reveal a cramped room filled with stolen electronics, jewelry, and weapons. Saul was a withered man with yellow skin and a nervous tick in his left eye. "Nico," Saul whispered, using the name only the street knew. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, the news said you were dead, burned in the mansion." "Disappointed?" Gannon asked, stepping inside and pulling Rowan with him. No, just surprised." Saul locked the door quickly. "And who is this? The maid?" Rowan stepped forward. "I'm the one who drove him out." Saul looked at her, assessing. "There's a price on your head, girl. 50,000, just for the location." Gannon moved so fast, Rowan barely saw it. In a blur, he had Saul pinned against the wall, his forearm pressing against the old man's windpipe. "If you even think about collecting," Gannon snarled, his voice a low rumble of pure violence, "I will peel you apart." "I wasn't. I swear, Nico," Saul choked. I'm loyal." Gannon released him. Saul gasped for air, rubbing his throat. "I need a phone," Gannon said, adjusting his cuffs. "Untraceable. And I need a laptop, and a car that doesn't stand out. I got a burner, and a busted Lenovo. Car. I got a '05 Civic out back. Rust bucket, but the engine runs." "Give them to me." Saul scrambled to gather the items. While he worked, Gannon turned to Rowan. "Check the news on the laptop. See what the narrative is." Rowan opened the battered computer. It took forever to boot. She connected to the shop's slow Wi-Fi and pulled up the Chicago Tribune. Her breath caught. Mafia war erupts. Billionaire. Gannon Moretti, presumed dead in mansion arson. The article claimed a rival gang had firebombed the estate. There was no mention of the maid, no mention of a survivor. "They think you're dead," Rowan said. "Good," Gannon said. "Dead men are hard to kill." He took the burner phone Saul handed him. He dialed a number from memory. He put it on speaker. It rang 4 times. "Yeah?" a voice answered. Gruff. Suspicious. "Leo," Gannon said. One word. Silence on the other end. Then a shaky breath. "Boss? Is that... how?" "Listen to me carefully," Gannon said, his eyes scanning the pawn shop, checking the exits. "I'm in the wind. I have the girl. What is Russo's move?" "Russo is claiming the throne tonight," Leo said, his voice hurried. "He's calling a commission meeting at the Sapphire Club. Midnight. He's bringing the girl's father." Rowan gasped. Gannon's hand shot out, squeezing her shoulder to silence her. "Why the father?" Gannon asked. "As insurance. He knows you might be alive. He figures if you are, you'll come for the girl's old man. He's bait, boss." Gannon's jaw tightened. "Is he alive?" "Barely. They worked him over pretty good." "Gather the boys," Gannon commanded. "The ones who are actually loyal, not the ones who took envelopes last week." "That's a short list, boss. Maybe 10 guys." "10 is enough. Meet me at the docks, Warehouse 4, in 1 hour, and bring gear, heavy gear." "We going to war?" Leo asked. Gannon looked at Rowan. He looked at the fear in her eyes and the determination beneath it. "No," Gannon said. "We're going to a coronation." He hung up and crushed the phone in his hand. "Saul," Gannon barked. "Give me the keys to the Civic, and give me that shotgun on the wall." "Nico, that's a Remington 870. It's worth... Put it on my tab." Gannon grabbed the shotgun and the keys. He turned to Rowan. "We're getting your father back tonight," he said. "And then what?" Rowan asked, her heart hammering. "Then," Gannon said, racking the shotgun, the sound echoing ominously in the small shop, "I take back my city, and I kill everyone who looked at you the wrong way." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek, rough and warm. "Ready to go to a party, Rowan?" Rowan looked at the man who had been her captor, her boss, and was now her savior. She didn't see a monster anymore. She saw a king in exile, sharpening his blade. "I have nothing to wear," she said, a small, grim smile touching her lips. Gannon smirked. It was the first time she had seen him truly smile. It was terrifying and beautiful. "We'll pick something up on the way. Something black." The Sapphire Club was a monument to excess, located in the heart of downtown Chicago. It was a fortress of glass and neon, a place where the city's elite mingled with its most dangerous predators. Tonight, the air around it was thick with tension. Black SUVs lined the curb. Men with earpieces and bulging jackets stood at every entrance. Inside, Vittorio Russo sat in the center booth of the VIP mezzanine, overlooking the pulsing dance floor. He was a man of expensive tastes and cheap morals, wearing a white suit that reflected the strobe lights. Next to him, slumped in a chair, was Rowan's father. His face was a mess of bruises, his hands zip-tied behind his back. He looked small, broken, and terrified. Outside, in the alleyway behind the club, a rusted 2005 Honda Civic idled next to a dumpster. Inside the car, the atmosphere was quiet. Gannon sat in the driver's seat, checking the magazine of a semi-automatic pistol he had acquired from Leo's crew. He was dressed in black tactical gear, vest, cargo pants, boots. He looked like a shadow made flesh. Rowan sat next to him. She was no longer in the flannel shirt. She wore black jeans, combat boots, and a fitted black turtleneck Leo had brought. Her hair was pulled back in a tight braid. She held a small revolver in her lap, her fingers tracing the cold metal. "You don't have to go in," Gannon said, not looking at her. "Leo can take you to the extraction point. I can bring your father to you." "No," Rowan said, her voice steady. "He's my father, and you're not going in there alone." Gannon turned to look at her. His eyes searched her face, looking for hesitation. He found none. "If things go south," he said, his voice low and intense, "you don't wait for me. You take your father and you run. Do you understand?" "I'm not leaving you behind, Gannon." The words hung in the air. Gannon leaned across the center console. He cupped her face in his hand, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. For a moment, the war outside didn't exist. There was just the heat of his skin and the unspoken promise between them. "Then stay close," he whispered. "And don't miss." He kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was hard, desperate, and tasted of danger. It was a claim. When he pulled away, Rowan felt breathless, her lips tingling. "Let's crash this party," Gannon growled. He opened the car door. They met Leo and his team at the service entrance. There were 8 men, all heavily armed, faces grim. They were the loyalists, the ones who remembered who made them rich. "The back door is guarded by 2 of Russo's guys," Leo reported. "Take them out silently," Gannon ordered. "We move to the kitchen, then the service elevator. We hit the mezzanine from the back." The team moved with precision. 2 suppressed shots, and the guards dropped. Gannon stepped over them without breaking stride, Rowan right on his heels. They navigated the kitchen, the staff screaming and diving for cover as the armed group swept through. Gannon ignored them. His eyes were fixed on the prize. They reached the service elevator. Gannon hit the button for the top floor. The doors slid shut, sealing them in with the smell of grease and gun oil. 30 seconds, Gannon said to the group. Russo will have his personal guard around the booth. Use flashbangs. Create chaos. I want Russo alive. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. Chaos erupted. Leo tossed 2 flashbang grenades into the hallway, leading to the VIP section. Bang! Bang! The concussive blasts were deafening, blinding white light searing the air. Go! 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 Gannon surged forward, his weapon raised. Russo's men, blinded and deafened, fired wildly. Bullets tore into the walls, showering plaster. Gannon moved like a wraith, firing controlled bursts. Double tap. Drop. Move. Rowan stayed behind him, her heart in her throat. A guard stumbled out of a side door, raising a shotgun. Gannon didn't see him. Right! Rowan screamed, raising her revolver. She pulled the trigger. The recoil jarred her arm, but the bullet hit the guard in the shoulder, spinning him around. Gannon whipped around, finishing the man with a shot to the chest. He looked at Rowan, a fierce pride in his eyes. Nice shot, he shouted over the gunfire. They pushed into the main mezzanine. The music from below was still thumping, a heavy bass beat that masked the sound of the firefight from the crowd downstairs. Russo was standing now, using Rowan's father as a human shield. He held a gun to the old man's temple. Stop! Russo screamed, his voice cracking. One more step and the old man's brains are on the floor. Gannon raised a fist. His team froze. The silence on the balcony was sudden and heavy, contrasting with the party noise below. It's over, Vittorio, Gannon said, stepping out from behind a pillar. He lowered his weapon slightly, but his finger hovered on the trigger. You're sitting in my chair. Russo laughed, but it was a nervous, high-pitched sound. You're supposed to be dead, Nico. You're a ghost. I'm very real, Gannon said, taking a slow step forward. And I'm here to collect. I have the leverage, Russo shouted, pressing the gun harder into Rowan's father's head. The old man whimpered, his eyes squeezed shut. You want the girl's daddy? Drop the gun. Gannon looked at Rowan. She was standing 10 feet away, her gun trained on Russo. Her eyes were wide, fixed on her father. Rowan, Gannon said calmly, put the gun down. What? She gasped. Do it. Rowan hesitated, then slowly lowered her revolver to the floor. Gannon did the same. Leo and the team followed suit. Kick them over, Russo ordered, sweating. They kicked the weapons away. Smart, Russo sneered. Now kill them. Russo's guards raised their rifles. Now, Gannon roared. Suddenly, the glass skylight above the mezzanine shattered. 2 of Gannon's men, who had rappelled from the roof, swung down on cables, spraying submachine gun fire into the group of Russo's guards. In the confusion, Gannon lunged. He didn't go for a gun. He went for Russo. He tackled the man, slamming him into the glass railing. The impact knocked the gun from Russo's hand. Rowan's father collapsed to the floor, scrambling away. Gannon and Russo grappled. Russo was younger, but Gannon was fueled by a cold, demonic rage. He punched Russo in the face, the sound of bone breaking sickeningly loud. He grabbed Russo by the throat and slammed his head against the railing again. Crack, the glass spiderwebbed. This is my city, Gannon roared, landing another blow. She is my maid, and you don't touch what is mine. He picked Russo up by the lapels of his white suit and threw him. Russo crashed through the weakened glass railing. He fell 20 feet, landing on the VIP table below in a shower of expensive vodka and shards of glass. He didn't move. Gannon stood at the edge of the broken balcony, chest heaving, blood dripping from his knuckles. He looked down at the broken body of his rival, then turned back to the room. Rowan was on her knees, untying her father's hands. The old man was sobbing, hugging her. Gannon walked over. He looked terrifying, covered in blood, sweat, and glass dust. But when he looked at Rowan, his expression softened. He reached out a hand. Rowan looked up. She saw the blood on his hands. She saw the violence he was capable of. And she saw the man who had burned down his own world to save hers. She took his hand. He pulled her up, pulling her into his chest. He buried his face in her neck, breathing in her scent. "It's done," he whispered. "You're safe." 3 months later. The Moretti estate was under construction. Scaffolding covered the fire-damaged wing, but the main house was restored, the marble floors shining once again. But things were different. The silence was gone. In the study, Gannon Moretti sat behind his massive oak desk. He was on a call with the mayor, dictating terms for a new construction zoning permit. "I don't care about the council, Bob. Just get it signed." "Good." He hung up. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple. The door opened. Rowan walked in. She wasn't wearing a maid's uniform. She wasn't wearing a flannel shirt. She was wearing a tailored navy blue suit, sharp and professional, with red-soled heels. Her hair was down, cascading over her shoulders. She carried a stack of files. "The audit on the shipping lanes is done," she said, dropping the files on his desk. "And you have a meeting with the Triad heads at 2:00 p.m. Gannon looked at the files, then up at her. He smirked. "You're bossy," he said. "I'm efficient," she corrected. "Someone has to keep this empire running while you play gangster." Rowan walked around the desk. She didn't stop at the edge. She walked right up to his chair. Gannon spun it around to face her. She straddled his lap, her hands resting on his shoulders. "My father called," she said softly. "He loves the house in Florida. He's fishing every day. He says thank you." "He's family," Gannon said, his hands resting on her waist, pulling her closer. "Family is protected." Rowan looked into his grey eyes. They were still dangerous, still the eyes of a wolf, but the cage was gone. "You know," she whispered, tracing the line of his jaw, "I never did technically resign." "No," Gannon agreed, his voice dropping to a growl. "You didn't. But I think we need to renegotiate your contract." "Oh? What are the terms?" Gannon kissed her, a slow, deep kiss that made her toes curl. "Life," he murmured against her lips. "No parole, no escape. You and me, running this city until it burns down again." Rowan smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile, the smile of a queen who had earned her crown. "Deal," she said. She leaned in and whispered in his ear. "Now, Mr. Moretti, where are you going dressed like that? We have work to do." Gannon laughed, the sound echoing through the house that was no longer a prison, but a kingdom. And that, my friends, is how the maid in the red dress didn't just walk out. She took over. Rowan and Gannon's story reminds us that sometimes the biggest threats are the ones you overlook, and the strongest alliances are forged in the fire. Gannon thought he was the master of the game, but it took Rowan to show him how to truly win. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of mafia romance, betrayal and redemption, please destroy that like button, just like Gannon destroyed the Russos. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss a story. I want to know, would you have walked out in the red dress or played it safe? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, stay dangerous.